Welcome back to another episode of the Miami Heat Roundtable. I'm your host, Amir, and I'm joined today by the entire crew. Plus, we have the return of a special guest, Ethan from the Five Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining the program once again, Ethan.
Hey, good to be with you guys today.
Awesome. So, the Miami Heat defeated the Boston Celtics 111 to 101 in Boston. The series is now tied 1-1, and the Miami Heat have essentially stolen home court advantage without Jimmy Butler, without Terry Rozier, and with a compromised Duncan Robinson. So the Miami Heat hit a franchise record 23 three-pointers last night. 62% of their field goal attempts were from three, and that's only happened four times in NBA history. So Ethan,
hmm
what are your thoughts on the game? And I know you mentioned that this team does not fear the Celtics. So do you think this Miami Heat can shock the world and keep the series competitive?
Well, I think that's the question. It's whether they can keep it competitive. I do think at a certain point, like the lack of bodies catches up with you. And you've got Eric Spoelstra pretty much, playing chess, and he's got about half of his pieces. So I mean, and he doesn't have his queen. Not that calling Jimmy Butler a queen, but he doesn't have his queen, and he doesn't have I would say at least one of his bishops in Terry Rozier. So it makes it tough. I mean, you got a bunch of pawns trying to get this thing done. It's not easy. I'll just say that we said all year that if they could just get to this series, that they had a massive coaching advantage. Obviously, you would have liked the Heat under any circumstances to be healthier at this point, but Spoelstra sometimes can do more with less. It simplifies roles at times, and it empowers some of the young guys, and we've seen that in particular with Jaquez and Jovic. I think we probably gave short shrift to Bam on our post game episode. If I had a chance to do that again after reviewing it, you kind of notice how impactful he was. It wasn't just the shot making down the stretch, but kind of the way he was able to handle things defensively, particularly on Porzingis when he was terrific, and obviously his ability to play against 1 through 5. So, look, I give them credit for the effort, and I comes down to this again. They don't fear this team, like they don't fear them. I think they respect them, but I think we've also seen with the Celtics this year that there's a certain front runner quality to them, and we've also seen when they've played against some shorthanded teams. I mentioned the game against the Lakers where the Lakers didn't have AD or LeBron, and Boston lost that game. So sometimes they have a tendency to relax, and then when they relax and they get hit in the mouth, then they don't really respond all that well. And so I think that's what the Heat are counting on, is just play as hard as you can. And the one other thing I said before the series, and I think this holds true, is you don't. I don't, and I think Spoelstra is actually doing what we said or what I said, which is you don't treat this series like a series. Like typically when you're planning for a series, you're thinking, all right, I don't want to use everything in game one or game two, and I'm gonna maybe make adjustments game to game. No, in this particular instance, you are treating every game like its own series. And I think you're throwing everything at the wall. And that's what he did in game two. And I think the plan will be entirely different in game three. And then I think it'll switch again during the game. So to me, that's kind of where they're at. I still don't think they're winning the series. I hope they do. It's an incredible story. And then, maybe Jimmy's a really fast healer and maybe Rozier gets right. And then you're playing Cleveland in the second round. And that's a winnable series for this team. But again, one game at a time. I think that an annoying cliche is actually most true now. And you just try to get at least one of these two in Miami and just continue to make Boston sweat.
Yeah. So Ethan, now, do you really think that our two young guys, since they're playing well with Jaime and Jovic, they're playing phenomenal, being thrown into this situation? Does that make them really untradeable now going forward? Because you really can't, take that for granted. Two young guys coming in last minute, getting more minutes than they thought they would, versus a very good team. So, do you think going forward does that make them untradeable for them playing so well?
I mean, I don't think they ever intended really to trade either of them going forward. The way that their build has been described to me, or at least early in the season, was that their young core going forward was Bam, Tyler, and Jaquez, and then they would kind of see what happened with Jovic. I don't think that they anticipated that Nico would ascend this quickly. His first year was described to me as basically a redshirt year. His second year was kind of like, all right, well, he got ready for the NBA, and now, okay, he's going to get a taste of the NBA. I don't think that they figured he would be starting the last 30 plus games. like he has, and also, you see him, he's basically a 40% standstill 3-point shooter off catch and shoot situations, and they really even haven't tapped into a lot of the playmaking, just simply because of the way the roster is constructed. So I think you're going to see a lot of that going forward. I don't think they intend to trade either of those guys, honestly, and I think, look, I obviously, to win a championship, you have to have star power. I'm not going to argue otherwise. Jimmy, even if he had stayed healthy in this postseason, is diminished from where he was. I don't think that he's a 1A you can count on, A, to play 70 games to get you the right seed, or B, to turn it up to the levels that we've seen in the past. So they do need to get more scoring help. I don't think any of us are blind to that. But I also don't think they're giving away a 20-year-old with that kind of upside to make some quick fix to make the fans happy, because they're all, they all, as the Heat sometimes say to me, they all need Ritalin because they need a transaction in the next 12 minutes. I just think that's kind of where we're at right now. Like, you look at the Denver Nuggets, okay, and I'm not saying that every team's going to luck into an all-world, all-time player in the second round or the bottom of the second round like they did. But if you look at the moves they made around him, I mean, they got KCP for Monte Morris. Okay. They got Aaron Gordon for not a whole lot. They, and Aaron Gordon wasn't, did prove he couldn't be like a top 2 player on a playoff team in Orlando. And Jamal Murray and Michael Porter were both good draft picks, but neither of them were like top 4 picks either. So they put a team around it, and then they've drafted smartly. And now you see Peyton Watson has kind of replaced Bruce Brown, and they've got others in the system. And I just think there are other ways to do this other than, we need a name. Let's go get the whale and let's just gut the whole damn roster and let's give up on the next few years to go. It's just not the way that they operate. And, I think with Dame, look, if the price had been where they wanted it, they would have acted on it. With Drew, if the price had been where they wanted it, or they could have dealt with Cronin, they would have acted on it. But I don't think they're desperate to trade Jaime Jaquez or Nikola Jovic.
I agree, Ethan. Honestly, especially with all the draft picks that we have traded for the future, with all the draft picks we don't have, it's really tough to just let young pieces go. So I definitely agree with you on that. Thanks again for coming on, man. Ernest here from Miami Heat Talk. Got a 2-parter for you. Promise it won't be long. You mentioned it a tiny bit earlier, so I'm sure after the Heat won this game in Game 2, Heat fans are all on the edge of their seats right now. They want to know, is it possible that Terry Rozier could come back Game 3 or Game 4? And then the second part kind of leads to what you were mentioning earlier about Jimmy no longer being a 1A. Right now, we're sitting on clown line, but we know what realistic is. We know the Boston Celtics are most likely going to win this series. But let's say if the Heat can make it competitive, take it 6-7 games, maybe even shock the world. Ethan, do you still feel that the Miami Heat may make some overhaul changes this offseason? Or are we going to give the NBA Heat fans their favorite 3 words? Run it back. What do you think, my man?
I mean, I don't think that they go into any offseason saying we have to run it back. Like I understand that that's this. I like I like our team. We run it back. They're always exploring. They just have a value. That's it. Like they're not gonna make a Minnesota for Gobert trade. Like they are not gonna trade 5 first-round picks to go get somebody. That's just not the way that they operate. And the other thing I'll say this about first-round picks. You talk about they don't have all of them going forward. That's true. Look at what they've done with some of these first-round picks recently. Okay, they got Bam Adebayo, who's now a 2-time Olympic U.S. team member. Okay, how many time All-Star at pick 14? They got Tyler Herro, who, for all the criticisms of him, has been a top 6 productive player in his draft class. They got him at number 13. They got Jaquez, where they got him. What was it, 18? They got Jovic, where they got him, and he looks like a potential star. So if we're talking about their last 5 or 6 drafts where they've actually had a pick, they made one mistake. They took Precious over Maxey. Okay. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that Maxey was clutch, honestly. But I mean, so what are we talking about? Like no team in the league really has a record like that of late, of using, mid to sort of lower mid first-round picks and getting all-star potential people. So I just, to me, this idea of just pitching the picks, I mean, it's only if you really think like you have to do something desperate for Jimmy. But I think the counter is going to be, okay, well, is Jimmy really in a position that we should do that for him? Now, I understand what he's accomplished for the organization, and Pat wants to take care of him. But I think Jimmy will be okay if they take care of him with money. Honestly, that's going to be the big issue going forward, is because I've heard there's been some discussions about this behind the scenes, and I'm not exactly sure this is going to play out quite the way Jimmy wants. Like that, if Jimmy wants a 2-year max extension, I don't know that the Heat are going to go there. I mean, it might be a 1-year max extension. And so that's really the question here going forward. And I still think that regardless of what happens in the postseason, Tyler is the piece that likely gets moved because it's always the third guy. That's always how they've operated. That's always the player that everybody else asks for. And so if Heat fans who are not big Tyler fans, want to be happy about something, he probably increased his trade value a little bit last night. And I give him credit for the way that he stepped up, considering all the circumstances and all the noise that he heard after that last game. So, but that's where it's at. I don't think they're going to say we need to blow it up. I think that there have been times, and they've talked to me about this, like the end of the Knicks run, the Heat Knicks run in the late '90s into the year 2000. They walked off the court after losing the Knicks 3 straight years as the higher seed, and knew we need to make changes. Okay, and so that's kind of where it's at. So they knew that they had to make changes, and they ended up making changes, and then of course Zoe got sick, and so the changes didn't really operate the way that they wanted to. I think they know they need to make moves around this core, but I don't think they're going to do anything desperate.
Nice to meet you, Ethan. So
Hey.
You pretty much answered my question, because I was going to say what's more realistic, a Jimmy Butler contract extension or Tyler Herro being traded this offseason. But I'll change it around and just go with this. So if Tyler Herro is most likely going to be traded, like what package do you see or vision that the Heat could get off him? Because, with the injuries that occur every season, he finally had a really, really good playoff game the last game too, but has been up and down during the playoffs, averaging 14 points a game. Like, is there, obviously this is going to be an addition for him in this playoff run right here. Are we going, because you brought up the whale, like we're not going to get that because that's not what the Heat really want to do at this point. Maybe if it's available, but like, what's his value, you think, at the moment or after this series, depending how everything kind of falls out for Tyler?
Well, I think the way we frame the Tyler thing has always been, okay, he's the piece that you trade to try to get a star. And we've had the conversation about Durant, about Mitchell, and about Dame. I actually think there might be a different discussion this offseason. I think that the Heat might consider actually trading him just to reshuffle the roster. And by that, I mean allocating his money to a different spot on the roster. Maybe it's a big that you can get yourself some more size and throw into the rotation with Bam and Jovic. And then you bring Love back as as kind of a supporting piece, which I think they'll absolutely do. So I think it's more that. I think this is more of a, like when they traded Eddie Jones and they ended up, getting Antoine Walker and James Posey and some other pieces. I think this idea of like dangling Tyler for the whale, I don't think that's where they're at right now. And I don't think that's where the league is at. It doesn't mean that league doesn't think he's a good player. But again, I think he has to be used properly. I don't think the fit with him and Jimmy in particular has been great on the court, and I think that is something you need to consider. And I think the team functioned better offensively this year when Duncan was in that lineup. And Duncan was right. Now, this is a different situation, that they're dealing with right now. So I just think we got to look at it differently. I do think Tyler could still be moved. I don't think they're going to push to move him, but I think he could be moved. But I think if he's moved, I think it'll be more, okay, can we get a big? And look, I'm not saying this particular player, but I'm saying, like, could you get a Jeremy Grant type player for Tyler? Like that's what I'm talking. Just a different kind of player, maybe fits a little bit better in the starting lineup, particularly because remember, they got 2 years left with Rozier. And they really haven't gotten a chance to see what the Rozier Herro backcourt looks like. And so, that's the one thing. And the other thing, the question that came up earlier, and I didn't answer about Terry, we'll get more answers on that tomorrow. I'm going out to practice. They're going to be cautious with the neck injury. So we'll see. I do believe that he's targeting playing in this series, but I think people got ahead of themselves when they said game 3. So we'll see. And I wonder also if Miami now that they got one in Boston, could wait until Monday, give him an extra 48 hours just to be a little bit safer. They have done that kind of thing before, so we'll see tomorrow.
And Ethan, this will be like the second part to it. I believe Caleb Martin is probably done with the Miami Heat. I just don't think we can afford him. So I seen something that people are seeing he can make about $13 million per year, around there.
Mm-hmm.
Do we go with the young players that, get the chance during the regular season? Players like Alonzo Williams or Jamal Cain, or how do we replace that big loss of Caleb Williams? Is it the draft? Is it a low tier free agent pickup? Like, which direction do you think the Heat would kind of go with that? Because losing Caleb is obviously going to be huge.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a given they lose him, but I do think that he could price out here, for sure. I mean, I had agents telling me what Max was going to make last offseason. I kind of scoffed at it, and he ended up getting exactly what they thought. So if you're starting to hear $13 million, particularly looking at this free agent class, I don't think that's unreasonable. I do think there are some teams that probably would go there. The TV contract is going to blow up again here soon. I do know teams are worried about the second apron, but there are some that are far enough underneath. Like, could you add a Caleb to like San Antonio, give an additional wing to play with Wemby? I know OKC has had interest in Caleb before. There are teams out there that I think that he would be a fit for. I know he wants to return, but I don't think he wants to return bad enough to just opt into the contract. So I feel like he's going to opt out. But honestly, I don't really know that you have to go search for a replacement. I mean, someone might come in a trade, but first thing, you're going to give Jaquez more minutes next year. Josh Richardson has a player option, so he's probably coming back. So you're adding Josh back to the mix. So that's another wing. And he started to get more comfortable as the season went on before he got hurt. And I think they'll bring DeLon Wright back. I think DeLon has proven that he's worth it. So if DeLon will come back on the minimum, and then there's the Highsmith question. So if you're going to pay Highsmith, I mean, you're talking about you potentially could have, still Jaquez, Wright, Richardson, Highsmith. I mean, that's enough wings, honestly. Assuming again a healthy Jimmy return, and you throw all those guys in the mix. So I honestly think the bigger question for Miami going into this offseason is like, what is Duncan's health? Because that's concerning. He's still under contract, but it's a back injury. That thing can be degenerative. Facet syndrome. I'd be concerned. I think everybody has kind of forgotten how valuable Duncan was the first half of the season, and he just again does not look like the same player. So is rest going to be enough for him? If not, they got to find a shooter. I wouldn't worry about replacing Kale. As much as I like Kale, I'm literally eating a Caleb Martin pizza from Mr. 01 right now. I don't know if you guys have tried it. It's good actually. If you like honey on your pizza, and like it's a little spicy too. But I think that they have a plan to replace Caleb if he asks for too much.
So Ethan, since we've been talking a lot about the offseason in the future, just bringing it back to the series. So for game 3, you can answer this one quickly. What kind of adjustments do you think Boston's going to make defensively? I don't know if they're going to allow us to shoot as many threes as we did in game 2. So what kind of adjustments do you think they're going to make defensively? Because right now we have a shortage of 3-level scorers with Terry and Jimmy out, and it's hard for us to get to the rim. So who can pretty much open up the lanes and try to create shots? Possibly, I'm assuming we'll have to create more shots in the corner. Need Jaime to continue to play downhill, which he's done a pretty good job. But yeah, what adjustments do you think we can make? And do you think realistically that he'd have a chance of splitting this series right now at home and getting at least one win?
Yeah, I think they have a chance. I mean, I wasn't counting on them to win up in Boston for game 2, even though they kind of have owned them in that building of late. So I do think they have a chance. I think that, again, additional wrinkles to look at. I think the ball may be more in Jovic's hands as they go forward. I think Spo gets more comfortable with that. I would be curious to see if he can reintegrate Kevin Love in this series. Kevin only played, 6 minutes in the last game? He played, I think, 11 minutes in the first game, 5 in the first half. I thought they were very effective, at least offensively. He had 7 points. And then the second half was not as effective, and it seems like Spo got away from him in the last game. Could you play Love with Bam a little bit more? I think that's a possibility. But again, there's only so much adjustment they can do with the personnel at this stage. I feel like it's continuing to kind of switch looks. I mean, Porzingis kind of gave away the plot. He said that they're making us think. That's what they want him to do. I mean, so I feel like we're going to see a little bit more of that with the switching of looks, switching between man, zone, maybe a little bit of press. I thought some of the soft switching hurt them in the last game. My guy Alex Toledo on our podcast has not liked a lot of that, but ultimately they got through it. So I feel like Spo adjusted to a lot of things we actually said he should adjust between 1 and 2. It's always tougher to adjust after a win. Any coach will tell you that it's tougher to adjust. It's tougher to get your players to buy into the switch that you're making. So Spo's gonna have some work to do here to get them to execute whatever he puts in. But the one thing is, what they drill these guys is like you'll only play for them if you can switch between different types of defenses on the fly during the game. Otherwise, you're not going to play. And so I think he's got a group now that he's comfortable with can do that. And that really speaks to Jaquez and Jovic and how advanced they are, because to have these two guys playing those kind of minutes in this kind of situation tells you Spo trusts them, and that's a huge deal. So I think what we saw, to me, the biggest adjustment is that has to stick is Tyler's got to stay off the ball when he can. And I like the distribution of 3s versus 2s for him. The mid-range stuff against this team, trying to get to the rack, he's going to get swatted a lot. It's not great, but just get him off the ball a little bit. Give him a little bit more space. And that was giving him the time to make the reads that he had to make when he had the ball. And that's one of the reasons I thought he had such a strong assist game.
Awesome. Man, amazing. Ethan, this episode was incredible, man. Thank you so much for everything. Look, all of our subscribers, I'm sure they know where to find you, but please, for that one person I'm sure, like your channel, the 5 Reasons Sports, but for that one person that watches us that doesn't know where to find you, please, Ethan, let them know where to find you, my man.
Hey, Ernest, appreciate it. Yeah, you can find us at 5 Reasons Sports Twitter account. That's everything, sort of the hub of everything. But also, we have a Discord called Off the Floor. You should check us out on there. That's where you can communicate with Heat fans all day long without the clutter of Twitter. And then, of course, the 5 Reasons YouTube channel, 5 on the Floor podcast. And then tonight, if you're Dolphins fans, or I don't know when everybody hearing this, but for the whole weekend, we've got a lot of draft content for the Dolphins this weekend, and plenty of coverage of the Panthers and Inter Miami as well. The Marlins, I refuse to mention. But other than that, you can find us for everything else. But I appreciate it, guys. Thanks, you guys do a good job, and thanks for having me on again.
Oh, we're always a pleasure to have you, Ethan. Thank you so much. Heat fans, don't forget to like, subscribe. We got some good stuff for you. Thank you.
Thank you, man.
Again, Ethan. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.